Let me introduce you, Shyam Raman, the political director of the Democratic Party of Virginia. Please give it a big round of applause. Thank you, Shyam, for coming.
Guys, Marisa, thanks for having me on. I'm Shyam. I'm the party's political director. Gosh, I think this is, so I started in 2015, which means 1, 2, 3. It's probably the 4th or 5th reorg that I've gone through, and I hate to be specializing at this point, but I guess reorg and party stuff is kind of my thing now. So unlike a normal local committee reorg, we do have a few added wrinkles this time around. Number one, the central committee decided to push back, and I apologize for the background noise. I'm actually in my bedroom and the washer's on right now because my fiance is downstairs doing her staff call, which is why I have the loud dog up here. So the central committee about 12 months ago voted to delay the central committee reorganization until well, between the Q4 and Q1 meetings, which is generally December until the end of March. They did that because we didn't have congressional district lines. And because the Central Committee is organized by congressional district, that proved to be a significant hurdle that would make it quite a bit more difficult for us to actually successfully complete reorganization. At the time they made that decision, we were hoping that we would get the census data in April. We didn't end up getting census data until late August, which has left us in mid-November still not having any new lines. So we're having to be a little bit creative on this front. But basically, for those of you who are familiar with the presidential delegate selection process, it's kind of a smaller version of that. Each congressional district committee is going to issue a call to convention with a certain number of delegates. I know in Fairfax County, Loudoun, and Prince William, we typically go one step further and include a delegate allocation for magisterial district caucuses, which I know you like to hold in Fairfax. And basically, folks will be able to run to be delegates to their congressional district convention. There will be a caucus to elect those delegates, and then at their congressional district conventions, those delegates will elect the base 20 members that each congressional district committee is allocated, across the Commonwealth. So every single congressional district committee has at least 20 members. Those members plus certain party leaders, so the DNC members, the Senator Warner, Senator Kaine, our 7 members of Congress, House and Senate leadership, the chairs of our constituency caucuses, and a few other folks. It's in the party plan that lists all of them. Depending on what congressional district they live in, those folks plus the 20 from each CD form a congressional district committee who will then elect 4 additional members, 3 representing cities and county committees, and then 1 representing the General Assembly. And then once everyone's been elected, they will all come together to form the Central Committee, which will elect the new officers. So that's a chair. I think there's 5 vice chairs, a secretary, and a treasurer. The reason this year is slightly more complicated is because we are doing local committee reorg and then heading straight into the Central Committee reorganization. I know Brian's going to speak to local reorg a little bit more specifically for Fairfax. But the biggest challenge really has been the delay in the census data and being able to figure out what congressional district each of you lives in. Because right now we actually have no idea what that's going to look like in hopefully the next month to, in the near future. We've been holding a few trainings. We held one last night, and then there's going to be another one on December 6th and another on December 13th. Marisa, I'll send you the links to those. Feel free to share them around. Our goal for all of this is just making sure that we're running a process that has the you know, that lets us live up to the small d democratic, you know, part of our organization to make sure as many people participate and are able to participate as possible. But I'm happy to take any questions, and you know, I don't want to take up too much of your agenda.
Shyam, this is Kate Spears.
Okay.
Can you also send me those dates and some details? I'll send you an email if you need a reminder, just so that I've got the information for the minutes for the meeting.
Yes, I can definitely do that.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
And just so everyone knows, yesterday at like 9:30, an hour and a half into the first one of those calls, I did promise a flow chart. I'm working on that. That's a sometime this week thing.
I have a question. This is Susan Davis.
Sure.
And I'm a newbie to this. I'm actually in Alexandria, but I wanted to learn about the Virginia Democratic Party, and I hope this is a good place to do that. My question is, you know, post-election, I was trying to understand what the role is of the party in elections. Like, because the reason I'm asking is because I know some people that ran and didn't really receive any support really from the Democratic Party of Virginia. And I think that's that's something that we really need to understand, or I do. And I'd like to, if you could explain what the role is, I'd appreciate it.
Definitely. So I feel like there are times when folks use the phrase the party, and there are any number of different organizations that they could be referring to. So I work for the state party, which is generally an administrative body that we do these occasional staff retreats where we always ask the question, what's the role of the Democratic Party of Virginia? And we always come up with some really broad answer, like to elect Democrats. What each individual component within our ecosystem does, though, they oftentimes get confused for one another. So the state party is responsible for overseeing the governing bodies, right? There's the local committees, there's the congressional district committees, we have caucuses, the central committee, the steering committee. And what I'd say is at their heart, the goal of those organizations and the primary role of those organizations is to govern democratic activity. So when you have candidates run for partisan political office, there's somebody at the party who has to certify them to actually be on the ballot. For all of the statewide candidates this cycle, that was the state party. For House and Senate, or House candidates this year, that was a House nominating committee made up of portions of local committees. And it goes so on and so forth to local committees and congressional districts as well. We run an annual voter protection program that focuses on every one of the 2,400 and some precincts in Virginia. I guess at least from the sliver that I exist in, it varies. So I'm really butchering this answer, aren't I? Which isn't creating any clarity.
Hey, Shyam, can I take a shot?
Sure, Senator.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to see everybody. I just got on a minute ago, but I heard the question. And Shyam, I think that a lot of times people get confused about support from the caucuses versus support from the party. And I think that's an important thing to distinguish. So when you're talking about individual House of Delegate or state Senate races, the decision about whether or not the caucus is going to invest in those races is made by caucus leadership. So in the House races, it was made by the Speaker and her team. And then when the Senate, when we run, it's made by our political team. So if that's the kind of support you're talking about, that's where those decisions are made. If you're talking about what the Democratic Party of Virginia does, in my experience, the Democratic Party of Virginia doesn't really sort of dive in to local delegate races or local Senate races. They, I think, support the party more broadly. And we also have a coordinated campaign that is largely funded by either the governor's race or funded by the governor, if we have a governor at the time, which we have for the last 8 years. Going forward, it's probably going to be funded in part by DPVA and whatever caucuses are running at the time. But those decisions are mainly made by the caucuses or by, to some extent, whoever the gubernatorial candidate is. And so the Democratic Party of Virginia doesn't have some pot of cash it has to give out to candidates and all over the state. Those decisions are typically made by the caucuses. And I think that's probably what you're asking about, but I'm not sure.
So I think the answer is that the Party of Virginia doesn't really get financially involved or hands-on involved in the elections.
So financially, no. Hands-on, typically in a way that makes sense for an organization that exists year-round. So we administer the voter file, we administer our voter protection program year-round, and then because we exist as an organization that is constant, we tend to run payroll for a number of different organizations. There are a number of different campaign finance laws, which I guess create different. There are no limits on transfers on federal dollar transfers between national and state level party committees. So we tend to be the conduit for which federal campaigns are run through. And we're actually a relatively small staff. I think there's only 10 or 11 of us at any given time, and so we don't raise money for candidates, but we do work with them. Whenever folks ask for support, we do our best to be helpful, and then we just amplify the however we can be helpful in filling in for the statewide and the coordinated campaign on that front.
Shyam, can I just also know,
Sure.
If you go look at VPAP, you might see money, what looks like contributions going out from DPVA to campaigns. And sometimes it looks like lots of money. What that usually is an in-kind contribution by using the Democratic Party of Virginia's mail permit. The Democratic Party has a nonprofit mail permit that a lot of different campaigns use. And in order to use that, the Democratic Party is required to report an in-kind contribution back to the campaigns for it. So it looks like DPVA is writing a check when they're not. They're actually just allowing people to use their mail permit. So that, if you look at VPAP, it can be kind of confusing sometimes.
Is it ever considered, thank you for that, is it ever considered that maybe the party committee, this is the committee, right? The Virginia State Committee, Democratic Committee, would be involved in more hands-on support with people running, that a place that they could come to for a little more, even if not financial support, perhaps direction, training.
So we do have a full-time training director, and I believe since she started in mid-March, we've done something like 90 different trainings for candidates, for chairs, for activists. We've done a few local committee cohorts or local candidate cohorts. I think generally speaking, like we want to make sure that folks are reaching out to their local committees to get connected to all of those. And that's like, it is something that we do provide, in the time before we have a nominee. But when it comes to getting more hands-on financially with campaigns, there does come a point where there just are too many for a single organization to support all of them in a financial way. I think not in 2022, but in 2023, when all of the county constitutional offices are up, including clerks of the court, we've got something like 17 or 1,800 races, of which I think 900 or 1,000 are partisan. So there does come a point where we just can't functionally do that. But I think the goal we have is to, be a resource to make sure that the committees are in a position where they're also able to help any candidates who need that help.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Anybody else have another question? you tell us, Shyam, how we relate to the National Committee?
Yeah, so the Democratic National Committee, overarching it, is in charge of managing the presidential nominating process. We elect members of the Democratic National Committee every 4 years at our state convention. So last June of 2020, we elected 5 new members. One is Atima Omara, who I believe lives in Arlington. Doris Krause-Mays, who's the chair of the Virginia AFL-CIO. Dave Leichman, who used to be our vice chair of technology, and then Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, and now, well, will be soon former delegate Josh Cole from Fredericksburg. The Democratic National Committee is a small d Democratic organization as well, where they vote on all the rules from everything from what states go first through their Rules and Bylaws Committee in the presidential process, all the way to the rules that will govern the National Convention. So there will be members appointed to the Rules Committee, the Credentials Committee, and then they also elect the officers of the Democratic National Committee. So we do work very closely with them, just because they are our connection to other states, and making sure that we're, especially in the odd years when it's really just us and New Jersey, that they're our way of connecting with folks who may want to be helpful within Virginia in any given cycle. And then also, like, the Democratic National Committee occasionally does financial contributions. I believe, they've mobilized their staff to help out in this cycle. And I think, Chairman Harrison was really generous and found a way to raise, I think, $6 million for our campaigns this cycle, which, wasn't just a singular check, but it comes in a number of different forms, whether it's covering the cost of Secret Service and presidential visits, the washer finally finished, which is a significant cost, but they're a really helpful partner with us, and especially when it comes to making sure that we're connected to other states as well.
I think we have another question in the chat from Tonya. Where does the combined campaign come into all of this?
So the coordinated campaign is typically the coordinated field effort between the top of the ticket race and any down ballot campaigns. So this year it was the gubernatorial campaign, then the lieutenant governor, attorney general, and then House races and occasionally local races. The idea for it comes from the fact that if everyone ran their own independent field program, you would have a lot of overlap, and it'd be incredibly difficult to make sure that you're not knocking on the same doors over and over. There'd be huge competition for volunteers, and you would also have a number of campaigns that may not be able to hire the same level of staff to cover different areas. So what typically happens every year is, and as Senator Serval pointed out, like, you'll either have the top of the ticket campaign or a table of sorts, whether it's the party, the caucuses, the Senate, the House and the Senate, or outside national groups. Like this year we had the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, Democratic Governors Association, Attorney Generals, Lieutenant Governors, et cetera, who will help to pay for a field program, and a field program that's statewide, typically driven by the top of the ticket. So in this case, it was Governor McAuliffe's campaign. And it tends to run through the party because we do have existing payroll structures, and it just makes sense to run that way. But that the coordinated campaign is effectively an arm of the active campaigns that are currently in existence, in paying for a field program. And I hope that answers that question.
So Shyam, we have a very active committee that would like to go and participate in a whole different variety of opportunities. What if somebody here in this committee would like to be more involved with the DPVA? What would be a good place to be or to start?
Well, I think right where you're at right now is the best place to start, right? You're a member of your magisterial district committee. You're a member of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. I always say, like, there's no point to me without you, and it does not work the other way around. And so, making sure that you're active in your local committee, it's the suggestion I give. I've really tried really hard with my parents to make sure that they join their local committee, and after 4 years of doing this, they're now members of the St. Charles County, Missouri Democratic Committee. But that's the first step, and I think Senator Sorvell can speak from experience. Started out as just a member of the Mount Vernon Democratic Committee in the Fairfax Dems, and now he's a member of the state Senate. And I think that's the number one way to get involved, is just being a part of this small d Democratic organization that governs the Democratic Party in Mount Vernon magisterial district, right? And then, if you have time and if you happen to get elected, there's the 11th, the 8th, the 10th CD committees. I'm sorry, I can't remember which magisterial district goes to what congressional districts in Fairfax. It's always a little bit of everything. As Chris pointed out, Mark Warner was the chair of the Alexandria Democratic Committee and a state party chair, and now he's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So everyone gets to start somewhere, and I think the best thing is just to get involved.
Hey, Matt, you wanna ask your question? Matt Reininger?
Oh, yeah, sure. I was just asking, how do you all make the decision on what staff you assign to particular areas? So, I don't have a particular anecdote. This is just a reoccurring theme that I heard talking to a lot of people who are interacting with the coordinated campaign staff throughout the general election, that they didn't really know our area that well, and that they kind of came with the DPVA playbook. And they're like, hey, this is what we're here to do. Here's the turf we cut. This is how we're going to do it. Thanks for coming. If you don't want to do it, have a nice day. So I don't know if that's something that kind of in our post-op we're going to look at, or maybe there might be, a future lens towards getting people from the combined campaign who know the area a little better and are from outside the state, especially too. A lot of people from didn't even know Virginia, much less the state itself.
It's definitely something that.
Sorry.
You're trying to.
Sean, this is a common complaint just from Fairfax Dems just in general, though, because we have kind of a organized group, and people know what's happening and whatever. They're always frustrated with staff coming in and kind of taking whatever the state plan is and just applying it here. So there might be a kind of more general question there as well about how we can provide feedback to make sure that we
I think
work together.
A good question. It's a fair criticism, and I promise it's not something that's specific to Fairfax or anywhere in Northern Virginia. We hear this from Hampton Roads, from rural Virginia, from Richmond. It's one of those things that's like the coordinated campaign gets created. The top of the ticket hires people, and those folks run an interview process. We don't really have, and when I say we, I mean the state party staff doesn't really have a huge say over who actually gets hired. I think what we always try and encourage is a balance between new folks coming in to give a new perspective over, as opposed to this is how it's always been done, like here's a new perspective, but also to make sure that we're hiring from the community. I will say every year at our central committee meetings, at Chris Bowling, who managed Governor McCall's campaign, has always stood up and said, if you have resumes, just send them to jobs@viademocrats.org. We do our best to post as many as publicly as possible, every job that's available. In the last 2 years, we've had all our campaign staff unionized, so there's been a much more structured process for folks applying. I can't speak to individual situations because I'm not part of that hiring process, but what I would generally do is just encourage as many folks to apply as possible. And we want to make sure that, everyone who is interested in working on the campaigns in one capacity or another has the opportunity to apply on that front.
Shyam, can I say something?
Of course.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
So, every one of these is different, right? And this year's campaign, I thought was run very differently than some of the others. I mean, Shyam already talked about the unionization of the workers. I believe the DNC actually made some kind of investment this year and had some requirements on that. But I mean, I can tell you, like, as the Mount Vernon chairman, I was constantly mediating conflicts between the top of the ticket and the bottom of the ticket. For the 4 years I was Mount Vernon chairman, and for the 2 years I was FCDC chairman. In fact, in 2008, I had to threaten the Obama campaign that they would not have access to our precincts if they didn't let us do what we normally did inside of our precinct locations, because you weren't allowed to go inside of a precinct without the signature of the chairman of the county. And they eventually backed off and agreed to collaborate with us instead of dictating to us. So, you know, these conflicts go on every year. And every coordinated campaign is different, right? And a lot of it's a function of who's at the top. And while this year it was McAuliffe, under Northam it was very different. His staff had a whole different managerial view. 2 years from now, when I'm on the ballot and when your boss is on the ballot, Matt, it's going to be a very different style coordinated, because there's going to be about 17 votes everybody has to cast at every precinct and 17 campaigns to manage in every precinct. And there is going to be nobody on top of the ticket. In fact, the top of the ticket is the state Senate. And so how that coordinated campaign, or if there is one, is managed is going to be very different than what you saw this year. And so we sort of have to take these lessons as they go each year and try and learn from them and figure out how to apply them and make sure we don't make the same mistakes year after year. I think is sort of the best way to answer that. But I had heard a lot of complaints this year about what happened, but I wasn't in the middle of it, not being on the ballot, but I heard a lot about it just like everybody else.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate your answer, and thank you very much. I'll just, you know, if there's any message to kind of go back and go up the chain, it's not necessarily on how you hire people and who you hire, but rather how they choose to operate or what their directive is when they're sent out into the field. So I think that hiring process is great, and that it's available to everybody, just food for thought, not even necessarily a criticism, just passing on the information that I've received.
No, and we appreciate that. I think we're going to do a few postmortems. I know everyone has a take right now, but our goal is generally to wait until we have the list of who all voted before making those calls. But you know, that's something that we're going to have to take into account, you know, heading into 22, 23, and then, you know, the big ones in 24 and 25. Not that 23 isn't big, or 22, but, you know, presidential cycle. So I'll wrap up and just be quick and answer Gina's question. So December 6th and the 13th, the trainings are on reorganization, and the specifics of what the process looks like, how it looks like in, you know, your locality, how it looks like at the congressional district level. And, you know, I want to make sure that I'm giving you a couple hours, a couple times before that process really gets in gear to answer any questions that anyone has. There's a recording from last night that as soon as I go through and edit out the parts that I said I was going to edit out because I didn't like how I sounded, we'll send that out, and I can make sure that Maritza gets that and can share that with anyone who's interested.
So I know that you make space to come and join us tonight to give us the perspective about the DPVA, and I really appreciate it because I know how busy you are in all the busy schedule that you have, but you make time for us, and we cannot be more thankful. So thank you so much, Shyam, in the name of the Mount Vernon Committee, all the members, all the volunteers and guests. Thank you for coming, and please keep in touch.
I'm also just going to toss my email in the chat. Let me know if y'all have any questions. Happy to answer whatever.
Thank you, Shyam. Please give Shyam a big round of applause. Thank you, Shyam.